take stock of your emotional health
Hmm.
because the highs are really high and the lows are really low, and it's very isolating.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, the founder and managing partner of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. I also am a serial entrepreneur, so I love to talk with and to help startups and small businesses. Today we have on the show Anne. And Anne will tell you a little bit more about herself. To give you a quick overview, she started a logistics company, did some of the jumped over to a bit the food industry, has been in the life sciences incubator at MIT, and now she's working with some animal projects. So Anne, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So why don't we just I did a very quick intro, but why don't you introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit about your journey and where you started, and then we'll see where you ended up today.
Yeah, thanks. I was really interested in languages and travel, which is how I got into international shipping and logistics
Hmm.
way back when I got out of business school. I did that for a few years, and then 9/11 happened. So that was a transition that happened to me, and I sold my part of that company. And then after that, I got into food import and distribution. I acquired two companies, one after the other, and we imported products from Europe and South America. And that was really interesting because I love the food business. And
So almost,
then,
I know it's early on in the conversation, but I'll cut you off for just a second. In the sense that, so you had your logistics company, and first of all, just for those, I always hear the word logistics, but maybe give me the 30-second overview. What is a logistics company, or how does that work, or what do you actually do?
so it was freight forwarding. So it's basically a travel agent for freight. So if a company in the US is buying furniture from Spain or Italy, we made the travel arrangements for freight.
Oh,
So a
so,
supplier and a
oh,
buyer.
all right, that is a great. That's probably more than I do from the industry prior to that. So thank you. So if I were
Perfect.
to take that, and because you were a little bit, we have companies that are facing, COVID and some of the shutdowns and everything else, and almost not, get it's different than 9/11, not trying to compare in that sense, but in the sense that, something that you weren't anticipating, that you wouldn't have expected happen to you, and it wasn't really, to a large degree outside of your control. How did you deal with that, or decide, okay, here's the time to sell, or the time to get out of that company and start a new one? How did you kind of decide to make that transition?
Well, our office was downtown next to the World Trade Center.
Hmm.
So we went through a lot of difficulties, but people still needed to buy products from overseas and ship products. So it was more of a personal choice. Then
Hmm.
I went to culinary school, which led me to further my interest in food. So after a while, I acquired a food import company, and some of the clients were clients of mine in the shipping business. So
Okay.
it was kind of a natural segue in some sense.
So you went from logistics, and then so the food industry, you're doing that over there. That was because you started. Was the culinary school kind of a personal interest and wanted to learn how
Yes.
to cook a
Yeah.
little bit better? And
Mhm.
okay,
Yeah, exactly.
so and then you decide, hey, I like doing the food and cooking and that enough that I'll jump over to that business.
Yeah. So we imported huge amounts of olive oil, balsamic vinegar, Mediterranean products, and
Oh,
sold them to companies here in the States and North America, Canada as well.
oh, cool. All right. So then, not to, so I interjected into your story, so I'll let you get back to it. I was just curious on how that came about. So go ahead.
So I did that for a few years, and then the recession hit, and I got out of that after a few years, and that was interesting. But that was before food was really sexy. Now food is sexy, but we were just doing large amounts of um, Mediterranean food and South
Okay.
American food. And then I got into life sciences. So that's part of my academic background, science and business. I
Hmm.
ran an incubator affiliated with MIT.
So how did you? So I mean, so how did you make that jump now? So you went from logistics, food industry made sense, and then how did you get into the life science incubator? And then how? What was your kind of your? How did you get connected up with MIT in between all of that?
Just personal networking. I met someone who was looking for someone to execute on IP,
Hmm.
educational IP.
Okay.
And it was always something, I was always interested in science, and my business background led me to this incubator.
Okay. So, and you hit on a word that I've always biased towards, which is IP. But how did you, you know, and for those that that are new to the episode, IP generally includes patents, trademarks, and copyrights. So, did you have a background in IP, or just had an interest, or you'd done it before in your other companies, or how did you, what sparked the interest in that area?
I had no experience with IP at all, but I
Mm,
was going to bring New York capital, venture capital, to um, educational intellectual property that was sitting in Massachusetts, anywhere in the life sciences that we could execute on the IP
okay.
and build companies through it.
So when you got into the incubator, because incubators have a lot of it's it's a little bit of a buzzword in the sense that you hear a lot of people that everything from that I've heard incubators are help your product get your product off the ground, to productize, to help you sell, to monetize things. To so when you say incubator, what did you do with the incubator? What did the incubator do?
If it was based on life sciences, as I said, so if someone came with a disease and they needed to find a cure or treatment, we would look for intellectual property and try and develop something and
Hmm.
bring in the funding to bring it to fruition, like a
Okay.
treatment for melanoma, for example, or an orphan disease, something like
So,
that.
so did you go out? So somebody come with you come to you with an idea, or or with a project. Would you go out and look to acquire IP for that
Yes,
business, or okay?
yeah, and execute, bring it to make a company out of it.
So how did you go about identifying or finding that IP, or deciding which one was worthwhile to pursue and make a company out of?
So we would search universities
Mm,
for the appropriate IP, whether
okay.
it be Stanford, MIT, Zurich, Caltech, whoever was working on the topic.
Mm. And so does because I've worked with a few different companies to get into the universities. And what was your experience with the universities? Was it because some universities are very heavy on IP, and they will file a whole bunch, and then they kind of don't know what to do with it, so to speak, and so then it kind of sits there and collects dust until
That's
somebody reach
exactly
out.
what happened. Yeah,
Okay.
they don't know how, for the most part, it just sat there and it was very valuable information, but it was not executed upon.
Okay. So then so you go to reach out, and I'm sure this is old hat to you, but I'm interested in it just a bit. So you'd reach out to universities and say, did you reach out and do your homework beforehand? You say, you have these patents that we think are valuable, or did you more say, hey, we've got some, life science or products, or, people that want to do something in this industry. What do you have in there? And then kind of comb through what they had available. Cause you could almost do it either way, right?
Yeah, you can. And it depends, because for the most part, the university owns the IP.
Hmm.
And then you have to go through different kinds of agreements and licensing arrangements, and sometimes there's and the name of a person attached to it as well. So by the time you get to monetize this, it's a long, detailed, difficult process.
Okay. And then one last question, then we'll keep on your story. So how did you, and again, doing it in every university seems to be a bit different. How did you go about evaluating the IP? Because I mean, some universities, they don't even know how to start to evaluate it or know what it's worth, or did you set up a licensing agreement, or how did you kind of, as you're working with the university and saying, hey, you've got this valuable IP that we'd like to help to, productize or bring to market. How did you kind of go about with those deals and figure out what was a fair analysis? Because you've got, and the reason I ask is sometimes I'll have clients that are almost saying, hey, I want to go out and pick up kind of the cool ideas that the universities are working on, and then to make it to market. Or you get students, or graduate students, but they have absolutely no idea how to evaluate it. So how do you go about evaluating what that's worth?
Yeah, each case is different. We build a company around each particular case,
Hmm.
and then each case was a different scenario. Like a scanner for melanoma to detect change in the skin was a different business. A different model of mammography was a different business, and there's a different life cycle for the products to get to market. So each thing was a different example.
Okay, fair enough. So then, or I keep interrupting because I just find it
Oh, no,
interesting,
go
some
ahead.
of that pretty interesting points. So you did that for a while, you worked with the incubators, and then kind of what was the next step of your journey?
So I was commuting from New York City to Cambridge. And then, as I said, these would take long life cycles for businesses. I needed my autonomy. So it was time to move on. I live in New York City, as I said, a device. It was
Mm,
an idea I had. And I said, let me just see if I can do this. A clean, compostable solution to dog waste for urban pet parents. It was in my head. I am not a mechanical engineer. I have a science background and a business background. So I thought, okay, let me see if I can really do this. So verbally, I tested it on people and they liked the idea.
mm,
Uh, and I found several engineers to work with. I went through quite a few engineers. This is all self-funded, bootstrapped. And then I went through a business accelerator with my idea and
mm.
successfully completed it and have a patent pending product now. And that's where I am. And
Cool.
it's called
So,
Curbicus, which means the word in Latin for urban is urbicus, and then the C in front of it means curb your urban pet.
okay, that's a catchy name. So now we're going to jump back to a little bit because you went. So let's say you were working with the life science incubator and you're at MIT, or work or in association with MIT. That's certainly anytime you say MIT or Cambridge or Harvard or any of the major law or schools, you're going to always have a bit of cachet in that. So as you're working with that, and you mentioned a little bit, you kind of got to where you wanting to have a bit of autonomy and working on your own. But how did the idea come? Okay, I'm going to go from life science incubators to working on compostable solutions for dog waste. I mean, that seems like a good jump, a major jump or a different direction. So how did you come up with the idea, and then what made you decide that that was worthwhile to pursue?
It's a major jump. Yes, it is, picking up dog waste, but it was a pain point that I've always had. I'm born and raised in New York City, and it was always been a pain point for me. So the first idea was I don't have a dog right now.
Mm,
Just angry at people not doing the right thing. So I wanted to solve the problem by coming up with something to make them do the right thing. And then doing my research, I realized that plastic is not the solution. Plastic bags, biodegradable, is certainly not the solution because there are so many different definitions of biodegradable. So
mm.
the real solution is compostable bags, and then finding a way to compost the waste and use it as fertilizer in urban parks. So it's a completely circular solution.
So was the pain point come from you'd walk down the street and after dogs, people that had walked their dogs and they hadn't picked up after them, and you kind of
Exactly.
got tired of all the waste left over along the streets or on the curb from people that weren't picking up.
Yes, exactly. And now it's particularly timely because dog waste can contain harmful bacteria, viruses, salmonella, E. coli, and we can't just treat waste like it's nothing because it can transmit disease.
Sure. No, that completely makes sense. And to your point, it's probably timely with everything else going on. So then you said, okay, I'm tired of this problem. I want to do something about it. Then, what was the transition between leaving the incubator and saying, okay, I'm going to do this as a startup? Did you work them in parallel or start to work the idea or, work at it nights and evenings, or you just said, hey, I think this is a great enough idea. I'm going to jump all in and, bootstrap it from the get go? Or how did you make that transition?
I said, if anything, I have to give it 100%. Otherwise, no one's going to really believe it.
Hmm.
And it sounded crazy coming from me, like a dog poop vacuum kind of thing. But enough people said that's a great idea.
Okay.
So
So then you had the idea, you start to work on it. You said that you go to a few different engineers, and what was the experience with the engineers, or what made you decide to go from one to? Because I mean, I get that I hear everything from, and or at least from I hear it from clients, and that you can go to everything from invent help, you can go to online, and you can try and hire one that's a contractor, or, that works in India. You can work one that's local. You can do it. So how did you go? First of all, find your engineers, and then how did you end up finding the right one for you?
I worked with a group called Collaborism that's no longer in existence. I've been doing this for 3 years.
Hmm.
They match entrepreneurs with engineers. And my frustration with them was that, and I kept going through their engineers, that I had a vision in my head that they kept telling me it's not going to work that way.
Hmm.
And if it's in my head, I'm going to make it work. So they finally, I think I was on the sixth engineer who now is going to be my co-founder, because
Hmm.
he really stuck with me. And for 3 years later, he's working with me.
Oh, cool. So
And
then,
we worked, sorry, with an engineer from Cornell. I have engineering teams from different schools,
hmm.
because I'm applying for grants. I got a small grant from MIT, a small grant from Penn State, and master's engineering students are working with us also.
Okay. And did that grant system kind of come through as you did work with the incubator or MIT, or was that just happen to
No,
be
independently.
unrelated? All right, fair enough. So then you finally find an engineer. So the one question I have is, so maybe you can explain your product a bit first, and then I'll ask my question. But so you have the device that helps to, excuse me, pick up dog poo, for lack of a better word, and make it so it's compostable, and so people will actually clean up after the pets. But how does the device work, or how is it different than just a plastic bag, or even just a bag and picking up after your dog? What makes yours better?
Okay, so currently the MVP prototype is printed on a 3D printer,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a high-end lifestyle branded device. So it looks cool. It's red.
Mm.
It looks like an urban, like, branded product that you'd want to be carrying around. So it's lightweight. It weighs less. It's I wish I could show it to you, but I left New York City in a rush and I don't have it with me. It's
Sorry.
like 12 inches long, and it has a button, and it's a vacuum, and you put a compostable bag in it, and you just bend over, pick it up, and it stays closed, and then you eject it when you get to the bin.
Okay.
And it
So
has a
then,
sensor that knows when you've picked up all the waste.
okay. So then you almost have, so first step is you have a device that's, a vacuum that will pick it up in essence for you and put it in a compostable bag. Is that right?
Hmm.
And then you take that, you'll go to a nearby bin. And I think when we talked before, you talked a little bit about how you'll also have, you're working to have specific bins or bins that they can then drop that in, so it can be,
Yeah.
because otherwise if you get a compostable bag but you put it in the normal trash, it's not going to do any, you're not going to do any composting with that, and it'll go to
Right.
the normal landfill, right?
It's
So
that would be better than plastic bags and
mm.
better than biodegradable bags, but it's still not my entire vision.
So how do you, and so when you had this idea and you're looking to or change the market, how do you get people's buy-in, right? So a lot of the reason, or at least, and we do have a dog. I'm in a lot more of the country, so I'm not as much in the city, but we'll still walk around and we do the same thing. We'll take a bag, we'll pick up after the dog, and then we'll throw it in the garbage, as most other people typically, if they pick up after the dog, that that's what you'll do. So how do you, change a bit of mindset of getting people to buy in or wanting to, first of all, pick up after their dog, and then second of all, say, hey, this is a much better product? How do you kind of start to educate or get people's buy-in as far as in the market?
Exactly. So we're trying to be the thought leader. First of all, we're creating a space, right?
Mm.
And then by having a device for dog waste, and then we're being thought leaders in the space. So I have several interns for the past couple of years creating content
Mm.
about how pernicious dog waste can be and how dangerous it can be. And then um, the gross factor, like, who wants to do that? Bend
Sure.
over and pick up dog waste, right? And now the big thing that in New York City is people are shamed into picking it up, right? Because you stand
Mm.
there and you look at them and say, what are you waiting for? And then once they pick it up, they just dump the bag on the curb. They don't even make it to the corner.
Mm. So
So we're
then,
trying to
oh, go
educate
ahead.
people about the bag. Plastic is banned in New York City,
Okay.
and biodegradable, people don't even know what that means.
So what is the difference between, and I'm guilty as everybody else, what's the difference or between biodegradable versus compostable?
Biodegradable has lots of different definitions depending on what it's made of. compostable, biodegradable bags can sit in landfills for years, even hundreds of years, depending on what they're made of.
Hmm.
And then
So
the
that's
compostable bags will break down, but they
uh,
really do need to be composted properly.
okay. So then you compost it. So then so you implement. It sounds like you almost have a two-stage or a two-phase project, right? Where one
Yeah.
is come up with the device, get people to buy in. The compostable bag is certainly better than plastic or even the biodegradable ones. It can take a very long time to decay or to break down. And so then you're getting people to use the device with a compostable bag. At least that way it's better for the environment. And then two is rolling out the garbage. Almost the area where they can put it in a specific bin where then that will actually be used for composting. So I imagine the device sales is almost, how do you get, or what's the plan, or maybe it's still in the works. How do you get buy-in? Because I would maybe, and I'm ignorant a little bit about it. So do you have to go to the city and get permission, or how do you get the bins across the state if you're to say
Yeah,
in
I'm working
states?
with that now with the
Okay.
Department of Sanitation. I've spoken to them a few times, but this is going to take a while. I just want people to pick up after their dogs. That's step number one, and educate them about the hazards of dog waste.
Okay. Fair enough. So then the question I'll ask: so you ever get a dog, or you have any desire to get a dog?
Yes, especially now I do. Being quarantined and bored out of my mind, I would love to have a dog. Yeah.
No, that's interesting. So I was reading an article a few days ago that actually, you have dog shelters and that, and typically they're almost overrun with too many animals, too many pets. There was cats or dogs or other things, and yet with COVID coming up, the animal shelters actually are running. I mean, in a good way, but they're placing all the animals and they're running out in the sense that everybody now wants an animal or someone to keep the company or something
Yes,
to
it's so
do
true.
as they're
Hmm.
quarantined in. So it almost then makes the usefulness of your product or the act, the desire for people to have it even greater. So that then maybe it
Yep.
will help to further launch things and to motivate people. Well, cool. So then we're to jump into that. So you get all the way through. So where is it at today as far as, and I know you touched on it briefly, but where are you at in far the process and launching it and getting it going, and how's that been for you?
We have a working prototype as of today. We had a little delay shipping parts and things because of the situation, but we have a working prototype. The launch may be a little delayed because of all of this, and we may do a Kickstarter. I'm not quite sure yet, but we have, as I said, just the working prototype, the website. We're educating consumers with information,
Okay.
and
So when do you anticipate to launch, or is that still a little bit up in the air, unknown, as you've had to hit delays and other things, or when's kind of the soft launch?
I would say hopefully by September,
Okay.
depending what's going on right now.
Always introduces a little bit more chaos or unknowns into the equation.
Yeah.
So okay. Well, cool. Well, that sounds like it is, not in the too distant future. So then one other question, then we'll hit on the two last questions I always ask at the end of the podcast. So you mentioned you've been at this, was it 3 years or since
Yeah.
you started
Mhm.
on the journey? And so is it, and it sounds like you're bootstrapped it, you're 100% owner, and you haven't taken any investor dollars. Is that right?
Right.
So how's that been? I mean, the bootstrapping is always hard, and then doing it for 3 years, and how do you balance that? If is it mostly been, apply for grants or go to universities or, go through the government, or how do you keep it bootstrapped and keep all that ownership? Because the temptation is always, hey, let's go take investor dollars, right? Or let's go bring in somebody so we have enough money, we can take it to market. And yet you give up control and you give up some ownership. So how did you balance that, or what made you decide to bootstrap it, and how has that been over the life of the company so far?
Um, well, it hasn't been that much fun, but I did get two grants, as I said, small, very small.
Mm,
And working with students has been great because
mm,
they love the clean mission,
mm,
the and they love the dog concept.
mm.
So I've gotten the best help from students. It's been so gratifying, and it really and refreshing, and they're great. And a lot of students get credit
Cool.
for helping. Engineering students, social media, marketing, PR. So
Oh,
it's
that's
been really
awesome.
helpful. Yeah.
Gives them an opportunity to kind of learn on the company from the ground up, and gives you access to a lot of good talent. So that's a great match. So,
Mhm.
okay, well, as we wrap up the podcast episode, I always have two questions I always hit on at the end of it. So the first one is always, so what was the worst business decision you ever made? And what the idea with that is always, we kind of hear the highlights. You're going to hear, hey, I did this and it worked out. Now we're on to this. And, it always sounds like you the highlight reels, and you watch the movie or you hear, or, read the book or the TV show. It always sounds like things just magically always work out, which is very seldom, if ever, how a reality works out. So with that, what's the worst business decision you made?
I think early on, I just assumed that everyone was motivated by the same thing, meaning I undervalued human capital.
Hmm.
I thought everyone was motivated by money. Just pay them more. They'll be fine, which is so not true.
Hmm.
I think I need to really get to know everyone that works with me, for me, and know what motivates each person separately. Like some people like quality of life. Some
Hmm.
people want a title. Not everyone just needs to be paid more. I made that mistake.
Okay, no, that's a fair mistake, and it was probably, especially if you're to look at, and I don't know if I ever include myself or not in the millennial generation, but there's almost seems like there's been a shift in the marketplace for a while. It was, hey, I'm going to work with the same company for 50, 30 or 40 or 50 years. I'll get my pension, I'll get my retirement, and that'll be great. And now you're almost having a generational shift of now it's more purpose driven, or I
Hmm.
have other things, or I'm not working. I don't want to work my whole life. I want to have a balance, and so certainly, I think, I'm sure a point that resonates with a lot of people is to you have to find what motivates and what incentivizes different people, and then structure, if they're a good employee, things to incentivize them and what will get them to perform the best. So I think that's a great insight. So last question that I always ask is, so what if you're to have a startup or somebody that's wanting to get into the startup or small business, has a good idea and just getting into it, what would be your one piece of advice for them?
One piece of advice: take stock of your emotional health,
Hmm.
because the highs are really high and the lows are really low, and it's very isolating. And you're going to have your friends and family, that's a great idea, that's a great idea, but complete strangers will say, that's terrible, I'm not paying for that, like that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And then you just have to really keep going, but know when to take some advice and maybe tweak it and change it a little bit,
Hmm.
but take stock of your emotional health.
No, I think that's great, and that's part of the motivation of this podcast is having worked with a lot of startups and done it myself. There's absolutely those highs and lows. In one week, it seems like everything's going great, and you made a breakthrough, and it's going to be the best, best month ever. And then it seems like the following week, everything is falling apart. And then the next week, you're going to have, somebody that's, some other thing that motivates you. And it's just there is a lot of highs and lows, and it can be a bit lonely or isolated, in the sense that a lot of people don't know what you're going through. If you haven't been through the startup, you haven't been through the small business, and you're doing, people don't get what you're going through. So there's certainly that's good advice, in the sense that people need to make sure that they are prepared for that before they jump in. So, well, great. Well, with that, we'll kind of wrap up the podcast. But I wanted to give you a chance, if people are wanting to either or get to know more about your product, or sign up for pre-orders, or wait, watch for the launch, or keep an eye on it, or reach out to you if they want to get involved. What's the best way to connect up with you or your product?
Well, the website is www.curbicus.com, or my email is anna@curbicus.com.
Perfect. We'll certainly make sure to let people know to reach out to you. And for those of you that are new to the startup or the small business arena and are needing help with patents or trademarks, certainly feel free to reach out to us at Miller IP Law, and we love to help startups and small businesses. For all of those along your journey, good luck with your journey. Get prepared for the ups and downs, and make sure to check your mental health. Thanks again, Anna, for coming on. It's been great to have you on. It's fun to hear about your story, and look forward to seeing how your compostable dog solution turns out. And hopefully, it's a raging success, and you're able to change the world and make it for the better.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Perfect.